I think today might be a light agenda, but we'll see if others have topics. Let's see, I was trying to look for any, I guess, are there opens that anyone wants to bring up or quick topics?
I have several opens. I don't know if we want to take a list of them or we can go by them one by one.
We can do some combination of both. Sure. Why don't you go ahead?
Okay. Well, to give an overview, they are EDK2 C coding style spec discussion, Dependabot enabling for EDK2, getting in the PyTool library and extension updates for the stable tag, looking at issue templates for EDK2 repo, and then a quick discussion on an Uncrustify update that needs to come for EDK2. So starting with C coding style changes, Mike, I wanted to bring that topic here to see, I guess if others had thoughts on the changes being proposed. It didn't seem like the exact set of changes, I guess, were summarized cohesively. If it was just the function call arguments change and the 80 column width change, those are the two that I saw. And then I also just wanted to talk about logistics and things like that.
Right. Yeah, it is those two. And I sent the follow-up email where I had summarized the links to everything with the links to the original discussions from 2017. And so, you know, my opinion is that those were entered when we were doing everything manual for the coding style. And since then, we've introduced Uncrustify. And we've already got the CI system and everybody trained to run Uncrustify now. So the idea of coming in with something like a major change like the column width or the number of lines per arg on function calls would be another massive change to our Git history to introduce those now. And we already gave everybody who wanted to provide an opinion about the style when we reviewed Uncrustify. So if somebody had a strong opinion about 80 column width or number of args per function call, I would have expected that feedback during the Uncrustify enablement period. So given we didn't get that feedback, and then we've got just these history, and what's happening is we're scrubbing the old bugs in the bug database. So that's a good activity. And some of them are against the C coding standard. So what I'm wanting to do is for those two, given that there would be a massive change to our Git history again, let's close those because those conversations never completed when they were originally reviewed in 2017. Nobody raised the issue during the Uncrustify enablement. And that if there's somebody that wants to re-raise those issues as is or pieces of them, they can start a new Bugzilla for that, and then we can figure out the coordinated update if the community feels really strongly about making another massive change to our Git history.
Okay, yeah, I think that at least resolves my concern because I thought we were pushing to get this done and into the spec based on what I was reading. But even opinions aside, there are some challenges with getting to an 80 column width in our code base. I think I noted that there were a few macros that exceed 80 characters just by themselves. And in those cases, that was the main case where I ran this through Uncrustify because it does have the ability to organize the code at an 80 column width. But in those cases, you still run into some things like that, right? Where I think we'd have to make some code adjustments. But I do agree that the code changes would be significant for this across the code base.
Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
I think I've missed most of the Uncrustify discussions. Is there any reason that, was it 88 characters was picked? Seems somewhat low.
I think we're currently at 120 in the coding standard and in the configuration. There was a Bugzilla entered in 2017 making a request to reduce it from 122 to 80. And so that was getting discussed because we're trying to work on a new release of the C coding standard. So that request back in 2017 is in conflict with our current Uncrustify configuration that has since been reviewed and accepted.
Okay.
So we're thinking of just closing the existing Bugzillas as will not fix because we've moved on from that when we were doing things manually to an automated way now. If I recall correctly, the reason for the 80 at the time, I recall someone saying that they wanted to pull up multiple, screens at once, multiple versions of the code at once, side by side on a single screen, and be able to see all of the contents. And 80 columns was something that they could, figure out how to do that for. But above 80, that becomes more of a challenge. I think diff utilities are our friend, and configuring your diff utility to be able to see differences visually, no matter what the line width is probably a better approach.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I don't really feel like when there's any problem with 120, but I have.
Yeah, I don't think we need to discuss it.
Affinity towards large screens, so.
I don't think we need to discuss it much. I think that the email thread that I was seeing, it looked like Abner or whatever. We were making a push to get it into the spec, and so I wanted to kind of revisit that. But if the decision is just to close it and move on, then that works. That sounds good to me.
Yeah, I think we got to get Abner to slow down. I think he was trying to push a little too hard on that. So yes, I think.
Okay. Okay. My other ones are pretty quick. We don't have to spend a lot of time on the other one was Dependabot.
Oh, actually, there was a second aspect of yours, which is if there's ever a suggestion for a C coding standard change that would imply an Uncrustify configuration change, how do we coordinate that? Right, because we'd have a release of the guide, and then we'd have a release of a patch to the Uncrustify config, and then an update to the code base to follow that new code style adjustment.
I think generally we can kind of follow what was done here a bit, which is we make the proposal, we agree on the proposal for the coding style change. I don't ever want Uncrustify to be in the way of us adjusting the code style the way we want. It's meant to help us, get where we want to be, not control where we can go. So I think we set Uncrustify aside, decide what we want to do and agree upon it. And then we can prototype the Uncrustify change to make it happen. In this case, I went off and did the 80 column thing just to do a quick example of what the code would look like and look at the Uncrustify configuration settings. So I think we go off and make that change, and then we can agree that we like the Uncrustify change, right? It meets what we agreed upon for the RFC to the coding style update. And then I think at that point we could go through whatever process we have to do to get the coding style updated in the spec and then push the Uncrustify change.
Okay. And one thing I want to just kind of to go slightly more into the process of the doc management. When we make a change to the documents in the Core docs organization, the first place we make the change is in the main branch, and that will automatically, as soon as a commit occurs on it, it'll show up as a draft version of the document. And I think it's important that when we talk about updating the Uncrustify config, we only do that against a released version of the document. So I think the order of operations, I think you've got a good start to it there, which is during the evaluation of the spec change, we'd want somebody to look at the Uncrustify config changes and look at the results and make sure we all agree that's what we really want to occur. And if we all get agreement there, then we already have effectively the patch for Uncrustify available for evaluation. And then we can then have a draft version of the doc published once the spec changes there. At some point, we let things queue up and we decide it's in time to go do a release of the specification. Usually, we try to think this about it maybe aligned with a stable tag release. So maybe the natural points where we'd actually apply the config changes is maybe we get to a stable tag release, you know, that we're going to go publish a new version for, and then we update the config of CodeCrustify only after the published version's available. So maybe that's in the weeks leading up to the release. We're doing that such that the next stable tag release that occurs has both the published version of the C coding standard and all the code formatted to follow that. Maybe something along those lines. But I don't think we'd want to apply the Uncrustify changes until we had an official released version of the document with that change in it.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's probably something we should write down.
Yeah, and you've done a great job on, I think maybe in the Uncrustify area, maybe you could just add a small section on alignment with the C coding standard spec and kind of list that order of operations there, just a bullet list. It doesn't have to go into huge amounts of detail because I think everybody that would be involved in it is here already.
So in the wiki page you're talking about, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I can add that.
So Michael, what did you want to say about Dependabot?
So I sent out a patch for enabling Dependabot in EDK2. I think, Mike, we said we wanted to discuss it a bit more in this meeting, but I think we both agreed on the general high-level process around using Dependabot. But I just wanted to see if we could work out the details to the point that we could move forward on the patch here.
And
right,
and I was going to say when I first saw the patch, the V1 of the patch set, my first bit of paranoia was, gee, what prevents somebody like a maintainer from just going and setting the push label, saying, yeah, that's good, go ahead, and then we have some commits from a bot that doesn't follow our required commit message format or signed off by and things like that. But then I later realized that, hey, we've got the same problem when we get different PRs from different developers trying things out. We've got the equivalent problem of there's nothing that stops the maintainer from just setting the push label on something that's not really ready to go in yet if it passes all the checks. So I then said, hey, I think basically what we have there for the V1 patch is really pretty good because maintainers have the responsibility to evaluate that everything's being followed from like the commit message format and was it provided by a real person and things like that. So that doesn't change. So there's really no harm in having these PRs show up from Dependabot that provide a notification that there's a newer version of content that we might want to consider moving up to.
Okay.
Hey, Michael?
Yeah.
Yes.
Or which
Can
Michael?
oh, sorry, Kavaki. Can you go back to the PR?
Now this is mixed styles of, we were going back and forth about making changes to the way our Dependabot integration would work. The ones with the do not merge PR were the V2. Mike was saying that, we prefer the V1 version. So that's starting from number 11 down. If we go to one of those, for people that haven't seen Dependabot before, this is what it would look like. So I enabled it on my fork to check for pip module updates, Git submodule updates, and GitHub action updates. I think the main GitHub action we're using right now is CodeQL, but this helps keep us secure. In terms of like if there's a security update for GitHub action, we'd be notified that we need to go to our workflow files and pick up the new version. Similarly, as you can see over here, there's the submodule updates are prefixed with submodule. The pip updates are prefixed with pip. Those come from the prefix here. We can customize that if we want to. I just set these to daily, and then I set the GitHub action one to weekly because those tend to, number one, we only have that one action, but they also tend to be slower in terms of updates than submodules and pip modules. But then over here, if you want to go look at one of these, you can go like, here's a submodule. And whenever we get the PR, we can come in and we can look at what got updated in that submodule. So it gives us the commits, that are coming in, links to the PRs as well. You can click one of those and it'll take you right over to the change that you're picking up as part of the submodule. And you can give Dependabot commands. Like down here, I told Dependabot to close the PR. Oops. And Dependabot closed it, right? And then I said Dependabot reopen the PR. So the full list of commands that you can use are right here. Every Dependabot PR contains the command list. And so as we come in and we're looking at these Dependabot PRs, we can tell it to do things like ignore, major versions, minor versions, ignore this dependency entirely. Like we don't want Dependabot to manage it. We can give all these different commands, right? If we look at like a pip module to compare that to there, I'll go look at this one, and you can see that here's the release notes. It includes the release notes if a dependency does a release in GitHub. And so here it's showing us the release notes for the 0.20 PyTool extension update. And so you have a lot of information about what you're picking up in the change that's being proposed in the PR by Dependabot. And here's the individual commits. So it's pretty useful for getting notified whenever any of our submodules or pip modules we're depending on are updated. And then we kind of follow the process that Mike was mentioning there, where we'd go off and put this on the fork. We'd send out a patch on the mailing list to get it reviewed like a normal change and so on. The main point of this, though, is that we can keep our dependencies up to date in a more automated way than us just going out and checking for things.
So is there a plan to have Dependabot auto invite particular maintainers?
Yes. In fact, I added that here. We can
Gotcha.
add. I added the people from the .github maintainer list because, as you can see, the Dependabot file goes in the .github directory. But we can add others. They just didn't get added because on my fork, it'll say somewhere on here that on my fork, right here, Dependabot tried to add us, but it received an error because we are not collaborators on my fork. But on the EDK2 repo, that won't be a problem for the maintainers that want to be on here.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And when we move to to the PR-based code reviews, the GitHub Actions I've implemented to auto-assign reviewers would look at the set of files modified. So if when it changes for like a Git submodule, let's say the one inside the crypto package, or like there's the Brotli one inside of the MD module package, it would look up the maintainers from that package that own that submodule file, and it would add them to the code review as well. So the what he's put in there is the auto add ones are good, but we'd also have the ability to actually cross-reference our maintainers.txt, effectively what is the code owner's file, and auto add the appropriate reviewers for the submodule or pip contents that were being updated.
Okay. So another question. Is Dependabot going to be configured to close old code or old bump requests? So like the submodule has 2 updates. Is it going to close the old one and add in the latest? Or
Yeah, it does that.
Plan?
It does that automatically. I think here these are examples where it actually did that.
Okay.
So you can see OpenSSL kept getting updated and it kept closing PRs and reopening them, to pull in the updated change. So if we look at this one, it'll say down here superseded by PR number 14. So that means it found an update, it closed this PR and put up PR 14.
Yeah, I thought you can unconfigure that if you want, right? As I've seen that done before.
Yes, you can do that customization if you'd like to, but
okay.
Is there a way on the submodule one? Because I see like for OpenSSL, it's like every commit. Is there a way to say only if there's a new tag as opposed to a new hash on the branch that's monitored?
I think we could look at that. I mean, we could also dial down the interval a bit. on the submodule. Right now it's set to daily. I mean, it would kind of make sense that they're having a new commit every day.
Right, but we only sync, like for OpenSSL, for example, we only sync to official releases that are fully validated. So that's kind of like the pip model, right? So
Yeah.
there's got to be some more configurability on the submodule one to say I only care about the actual releases, official releases from that repo, not every commit.
Yeah, I think we can do that. As long as every repo has, I think we'd have to look at it at a per repo basis to see what their tagging process and release process is. But I'd imagine that we have that capability.
Okay. And I know that like our CMOCA mirror, it's like doing the wrong thing for that one. And I think it's maybe because the default branch of our CMOCA mirror is pointed to the branch that has the GitHub action to sync from the into the mirror
Yep.
instead of the actual code that we want to actually watch with Dependabot. So I think there's some more things we have to do on submodules. I said some of those may have to be fixes in the repo we're pulling from, not the action itself.
For this initial version, would you want me to just take the submodule piece out when we get the pip module one in? Because I think that one's pretty straightforward and helpful. And then we can work through what we want to do per submodule separately.
That sounds good. Yeah, that's probably a good idea, just to get it going as fast as possible to make it available to monitor those, and then we can work through those submodule issues.
Okay.
One other concern I have is with the pip ones are going to get pretty annoying.
Well, pip is usually release based. Like, I think that most people, whenever they publish to pip, they're expecting it to be picked up externally. Like we use pip in Project Mu, and it's pretty manageable. Like everything we get is a release usually from all the pip modules.
Yes, so the release, but you don't necessarily want to have to review each one of those, do you?
We do. We always want to be. We never want to fall behind because we, you know.
Well, what I mean is, you don't want to have to manually review it. It should auto merge pip dependencies, as long as they're not a major version change.
Yeah, I mean mainly
if they build and don't cause any issues in the CI.
Yeah, that's what we use this for, right? Is because whenever the PR is created, it runs through CI, so we can see our CI results, and then what we do is we make sure there's nothing devastating coming in the pip module update that we don't want. But if it looks reasonable and it passes CI, you know, we take it.
But I thought you were saying you're not going to have Dependabot auto merge them.
No, Dependabot will never auto merge. It'll put up
not
the
Dependabot. There's a separate tool for that.
I don't, but we don't want auto merge, right? We want our normal review process to happen before it's merged.
Even for bumping pip packages. Okay,
Yeah.
Seems a bit. I'm just concerned that will get kind of onerous. That's all.
Well, it all depends on the frequency, right? Right now, we're hit and miss frequency on these things, 6 months to a year. So even doing this like monthly or weekly would be an improvement for getting us on top of things a lot better. So, you know, running it daily, that's informative, but the you know, the frequency that we'd actually go through a code review and get an update is probably more at the fastest frequency once a week, probably more likely once a month.
I mean, this is what, if you look at like one of our repos that uses Dependabot regularly, I mean, this is what it looks like, right? So today we had Dependabot come in. We had it make an update on the 12th. We had it update some stuff on the 11th. We had it update some stuff on the 8th. The point is that we're not spending very much time on these.
Okay. Sorry, I guess my experience in the past, I've used Python projects that have like 200 pip packages or something, directly or indirectly, right? And then, you know, that becomes painful.
Yeah, I mean, most of these are submodule updates, and like we use Dependabot to manage our submodule updates, so we don't have to. But as far as pip modules go, there's not really many pip module updates coming in here. Like you can see regex is doing like a monthly release cadence. We have some stuff going on with PyTool extensions and library that's probably every few months on average, and stuff like that. It's not too bad. Okay, I think out of this conversation, my takeaway was I'll remove the submodule piece and send the patch back out, and base it on the V1 version, which doesn't have the do not merge PR. Things like that. All right, maybe we can quickly talk about the issue template. I sent out a proposal to use an issue template in EDK2 so that right now, I think, well, a lot of people, they are, a lot of the like open source community is used to the process that if they need to file a bug, they go to the issues section of the GitHub repo that they're on. And we don't use the issues in GitHub at the moment. So I was proposing that we could have the issues section have a template that looks like this. And so whenever people come here following their normal process to file an issue using GitHub, they would see that we have these links. Instead of being able to file a bug, they would be given this information, and it would direct them to submit their bug reports and feature requests here. Whenever they click here, it takes them to Bugzilla. So it would redirect them to Bugzilla for that. For reporting security issues, it would take them to the Tiano Core wiki on how to report a security issue. And for the mailing list for submitting code patches and questions, it would take them to that page. And then it would also allow, give them an indication that we have a discussion section on the repo that they can use as well. And it takes them to that. So I was wondering if we wanted to bring this in to help redirect people or not, I guess.
I think it's a good idea to have the redirects there, especially given the in earlier meetings here, we've discussed a number of potentials for pulling more things into the real GitHub issues as a migration path. So this, at least everyone will start going here first as a newcomer, but then this will, over time may become the area where you actually do the real issue entering, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking as well. I mean, it doesn't really hurt anything. I think it just helps. A lot of people are just used to, you go to a repo, you do pull requests, you file issues there and stuff, and so it helps point them in the right direction if they're new.
Sure. Anybody else have objections to this?
Michael, this is just a file in the GitHub folder, is that correct?
Yeah, so if you go, it's this issue template here.
Okay.
Pretty simple.
Looks good.
Yep.
All right. Oh, the stable tag. That was the next one. EDK2 PyTool extensions, library, and well, I guess extensions and library update for the stable tag. I resent out that patch series. I just wanted to see if you needed or anyone else needed additional, background on why we would propose to take the latest PyTool extensions and PyTool library updates into the stable tag.
Yeah, I think you need a little stronger, because you say recommend as opposed to it's absolutely required or these terrible things will happen. So I think what I saw in there is the terrible things that happen is we have insufficient coverage of PRs through CI for file changes, right?
Yep.
And is there an example of a PR that passed our CI but then failed the post commit change?
So I don't believe, Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we're running with the 12.1 library yet. So it's really when you move to 12.1 library, which we were moving to that for another reason, if you don't move to the 20.0 extensions, then you get the bad situation.
Well, I think you're in the bad situation with 12.0. Unfortunately,
okay.
Yeah, because the 12.1 is just that one line fix for returning the proper case from Git containing modules. And I think 12.0 changed the logic for Git containing package to not return. It basically changed the logic there such that it returns a true package rather than the name of a parent directory of a file, which is what it did before. So before, if you passed it a file, and like if I passed it this config.yaml, I think it would return you issue template, if I remember right. Something like that, right? The point is it's not a package. It's just the name of the parent directory. And so the update that happened was Git containing package in PyTool library was updated to return none instead. But that change in return value needs corresponding logic in the PyTool extension side, because now the PyTool extension caller to that function needs to know, oh, I'm going to get none back in this case. I'm not going to get the name of a directory, right? And so that's the reason they need to be paired, or one of the reasons they need to be paired.
Yep. And I can show an example. It is an example from Project Mu, but in that case, for example, a submodule got updated, and the PR eval step, which is in all of these, they're both common across Project Mu and EDK2, basically said, oh, that file isn't a file, it's none, so I'm just going to keep going, and I'm not going to build this package, and therefore a bunch of submodule updates got in that didn't really have PR checking.
So yeah, I'm trying to understand an actual breaking case for our EDK2 downstream consumers that are just consuming the EDK2 release and integrating it into their environment. And they're using Stewart tools, so it's only use of Stewart tools that this can be seen. And if and only if the file modified is a submodule update within their downstream.
If the files modified are not files within a EDK2 style package, right? So submodules, in some cases, especially in Project Mu, we don't put them inside a package, right? So because we submodule in other EDK2 packages. So in that case, they're just in a folder. They're not in an EDK2 package. They're just in a folder that we ultimately will put on a package path, but it's just a folder in the file system. Like the Azure Pipelines files are files like that. The base tools is not technically a EDK2 package. Anything that doesn't have a DEC file and is described as a package, right? Anything not in those, ultimately, it has changed the behavior about how those are reported, and it will skip the PR for those if those are the only dependencies in the PR.
So like a base tools C tool file change would have this issue, right?
Yes.
Okay. So that would be a good example to put in that just I would follow up with this is not a recommended change, it's a required change because we are getting insufficient, incomplete coverage of the PR through CI testing that would not be caught until after merge, and then list a couple of conditions for which that can occur. Just want to have the justification for the stewards to say that, does this have to go in for the stable tag or can it wait? And I think the other element of it is that it is kind of a cascade issue, right? We had some critical fixes we needed to get in that got in well before the soft freeze for the PIP requirements, but then those changes had some issues where you needed to continue to do some updates for the case and then also for this one. If we had never started down that path, we'd have been on a much older version of the tools with a bunch of other issues, but stable. But it took us getting through all of these to get back to a stable point, right, Sean?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if I mean, there's also a position that says, hey, if we're already at hard freeze, like no one's going to be submitting PRs. But if you do expect anyone downstream to consume this and consume it the stable tag and lock to those pip modules versions, you'd want them to get a working version, right?
Yes, absolutely. This is not about just keeping the EDK2 stable during the hard freeze. This is also about anybody consuming the stable tag for a long period of time.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, so I'll send out an updated cover letter, I think, on that one to mention that it's required.
Yeah, and a couple examples of where you'll get incorrect coverage for the PR that would only show up then after post-merge tests.
Okay.
But that's the terrible event, right? We never want to be in that case. Those are painful to deal with.
Yep.
Okay. I think I've taken up enough of the the meeting time. I did send out one last thing. Is I did send out a CodeQL series last Wednesday that I haven't seen any feedback on yet. I think it's about 12 patches long. It includes Eric's changes for some of the CodeQL query fixes. In addition, there's some what I consider important fixes and base tools in there. There were some pretty fundamental issues, especially in the Antler code, that are addressed in that patch series. So it'd be a good one to start getting reviews on and try to get in after the stable tag.
Yeah, which fixes in particular? Or the base tool one?
Basically, several places in the Antler code overrun their buffers very blatantly. They try to predict what buffer size they need to store a string, and their attempts are not good in doing so.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't scan the base tools, but you did. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Anyways, it'd be good to start getting some reviews on that because it does touch several packages. And I think there are some important fixes in there. And it enables 4 new CodeQL queries for us. Okay, that's all from me. Thanks.
Sounds good. Do others have opens for today?
I'm on the CodeQL. Michael, have you put up anywhere kind of the planned set of checkers that you think are the minimum set for us to have the recommended set for C code? Just summarize somewhere with status and owners. Even if owner is none at this point.
Well, as I mentioned, I do have them in the RFC thread. I have not moved them to a more long-term location like the wiki page yet, but I will do that. I do have the list of queries there, though, that I think are important starting points. And we've gone through a decent portion of that list already with that patch series.
I think we went through the whole list. The only open ones are base tools, which I didn't scan. So
yeah, I think that was kind of like the starting list. I think once we can kind of get to the point where we can start to go look around at the CodeQL repo and see what else is there, and people can start to bring in queries that are useful. So I don't want to just say that we have to stick to the list, but that was kind of just like the initial set that were considered, or at least I considered, fundamental.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm looking for is for a project that is C code based. If there's a recommended set from CodeQL or a common configuration set for CodeQL, I mean, I think that's what we should target initially, and then kind of do an assessment of where we're at.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. I'll put that page up.
Okay.
While we're that just reminded me of something else. I did let me share the window for this one real quick.
By the way, my reason for wanting to have a single location for that is I'm trying to get more interest in people to help in this space to help you, Michael. So having the place to point them at and let them pick from the list that's unassigned is kind of what I'm after.
Okay. I did in Project Mu, and I'll bring this over to EDK2 at some point soon. But I did add a CodeQL plugin. So this might be an entire topic in and of itself. But there's two pieces to this. There's one called CodeQL build plugin. And CodeQL build plugin produces a CodeQL database from your normal firmware build. So you don't have to do anything special. All you do is just run your normal Stewart build command, and you will get a CodeQL database generated. So you don't need to know anything about CodeQL. You just run your build command. The Analyze plugin runs in post build, and it discovers the database that's generated, and then it will tell you in your build results how many errors you have, how many CodeQL failures you have, and it will allow you to pass or fail the build. It'll also generate your serif file, which is the kind of standard format used for reporting static analysis failures. It'll generate the serif file from your database for you. And then you can open that serif file in a serif viewer, like there's a VS Code plugin that can open those. And the nice thing is, if you do open it with something like the VS Code plugin, you can click on the CodeQL errors shown, and they will take you directly to the source code file and the line that the error is on. So it's this really kind of makes it really convenient to run CodeQL locally. You just have to run your normal commands, and it kind of hooks into the build process and generates the database and provides the analysis. So this is something that I just completed, and I have it integrated with Project Mu. But I think as we start to do more and more CodeQL work in EDK2, it's probably something I'll bring over to EDK2 to help improve the local developer experience with CodeQL. Just wanted to share that. If anyone's interested, you can go here and take a look at it. Okay, that's all.
All right, anybody else with topics?
Give a 1-minute update on the code coverage for host space builds. Did end up getting a sample item built, not with EDK2 yet, but I had to pull down the leading edge of GCC to get it working. So even if we do go that route, we'll be waiting for GCC 13, I believe, before we'll get those upstream changes. So hopefully in the coming week or two, I'll be able to find time to get a OVMF example going.
All right, Eric, this is for bare metal code coverage.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. I got a sample app working, but see if I can get it working for EDK2, because there's some like specific flags we use that may trounce on the GCC line. So we'll have to write a bunch of stubs to get that probably correctly linking. So.
Okay, sounds good.
Two quick things, Sean. I see Lemming's been able to join. So Lemming, is this a good time now with daylight savings? You're able to attend this time slot?
Yes. I can join. I can join this meeting.
All right, so that's good news. I don't know if you heard the conversation about the PIP requirements, another PIP requirements update for the stable tag, and that it looks like in this forum we're strongly recommending or requiring that it be part of the stable tag release. So we'll need to get the steward's approval and your evaluation of that to try to get that in during the hard freeze.
Okay.
So topic number 2, Sean, I'm curious how we potentially coordinate with the SCT team for EDK2 I know that there was that presentation about running target-based unit tests and something like QEMU and be able to collect the results as far as a way to extend our boot to shell test to actually go run more tests past that. I'm wondering if we want to figure out how to coordinate with the SCT releases so that, we're running a version of the SCTs as part of our release process and that they're using, well-known versions for their SCT release process. And if we could somehow automate the running of their SCTs, I think that would be good to run. Maybe not with every, code review PR, but maybe once a week or once a month, figure out if there's SCT escapes that we need to work on and maybe use some of that automation around collecting results running in the shell with command line versions of the SCTs. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that and how to coordinate.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a good idea. And I'll check with some people on my team. We have been doing some work to make the SCTs easier to run with the intent of integrated into the automation pipeline. I think we'll have a pretty big set of debt to start with, as last time I checked, there's still a number of failures with the SCTs. And but I think overall the goal seems like a good idea, and it might lead to, I think we've talked about in the past of doing a weekly build where we run significantly more tests. I think that would make sense. I'd want to start also with who wants to own it, right? I think, one of the challenges we definitely have with all this stuff and everything in EDK2 is getting the right ownership in place. So I don't know if that's the SCT, the people that are working on that, or that's someone from this group, or if there's others that want to step up and kind of own and deal with triaging those bugs and working with the groups to fix them.
Yeah, I think they already do official releases of the SCTs from the EDK2 test repo. So maybe seeing if one of their developers can come to this meeting and describe what their release process is, and then see if there's ways to collaborate on getting it automated if it's not.
Sorry, so what's that acronym you keep using? STP? I haven't run across that one before.
UEFI self-certification tests.
Oh, SCT. Oh,
yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Who's running that then?
It's made available. It used to be available from UEFI.org, and it got donated to the EDK2. So there's an EDK2-test repository with that code in there, and they do releases of that. And the idea is that as there's spec releases from UEFI, those SCTs get updated to match that spec. So you can then verify that your complete firmware solution for a platform is conformant with the UEFI specs.
No, I know what the SCT is, but for someone's actually running that, and listen to where anyone was actually running it.
Well, we assume platform vendors do. Not necessarily part of the open source project here, but the downstream consumers of us do.
Yeah, I'm not confident that that's happening, at least.
Mike, Kenny, that the tests are still frozen back at 2.7b, right?
No, but I think that's why we want to start this conversation, understand what the status is and how we collaborate better.
Well, I'm happy to be an owner of it, or co-owner. I'm doing a lot of validation work here. So.
Okay, that's great. I think it's a great idea to add to the kind of the manual test stuff that we talked about last week on physical platforms. I think if we had the bare metal code coverage, it would really add to it, because at that point we could build up and kind of see where our gaps are and see what type of additional code coverage is needed and not be flying quite so blind.
So the FWTS tests that the canonical guys have been writing are sort of staying a little bit closer to the spec NT core code base, right? They regularly release updates every month or two or so. as opposed to the SCTs, which I don't think anybody has touched in a long time.
They're still being developed, and I know they met just a couple weeks ago. Like I said, Harry, someone on my team actually is trying to contribute a couple things back, and we have taken it as a goal to try to get back down to 0 failures for our platforms and projects. I would argue that there's a lot of debt in that we're gonna, as a community, need to resolve. Some things are, the spec isn't super clear, or the way they've authored the tests are dependent upon certain behaviors. And so there's just a fair amount of conversation and debt that's going to be involved in getting back to a clean run. But I guess one of the external pressures we've seen is that there are large enterprises and groups that are requesting results and or the explanation of why you have failures. In the firmware space, there's not a lot of publicly available testing. There's not a lot of ways to differentiate between different platforms. And so we have seen an increase in large enterprise vendors asking for results and wanting explanations when it's not a clean run. And they don't care if the tests are good or bad. They just want to understand why. So I think it's probably a service to everyone here to try to improve those a little bit and get them integrated as part of this process.
Yeah, there used to be a meeting on the TNOCore calendar for the SCT team to do a bug scrub. And it looks like, is it still there?
It's still there, because I think it was last week.
Yeah, I don't see it in future weeks. So anyway, so I think some of the there it is, it comes back. I think some of the people we want to reach out to are on that meeting invite. I'd recommend let's try reaching out to them, maybe Sean, and see if they can come join us for a meeting here and kind of go over what their current status and plans are.
Okay, great. I mean, is there anyone else here that has already done this on their platforms? I assume that it's not unheard of for other platform vendors to want to have this capability.
Yeah, I know that we have done it a lot in the past. I don't know our current status. It's not in my area, but it's certainly something that was required to finish a project in the past.
Okay. Well, how about next week, if anyone can bring back any info they have related to whether they've done any automation with it, whether they still run it, or find it valuable, or what, that can help guide kind of our investments.
Sounds good, Sean. Thanks.
Okay. One thing on that, we did actually convert all the variable ones into a host-based unit test. And the process wasn't that difficult. And so, I think that also makes it much easier to run, much faster to run, much faster to triage and all those. So, a lot has changed since those were developed. I don't know. Maybe they have some new ideas around bringing more relevance to that environment. All right, with that, anyone else have any opens? The last thing I had, Mike, if no one else does, is, and we kind of talked about this a while ago. I don't remember the answer. There's getting to be a number of things that we're tracking in this meeting. I'm not doing a great job of tracking them. And we're definitely not completely, closing them all out. And so I was wondering again, how to get some tools to track these better, make it visible to others, how they can get involved. Much kind of like you talked about with, where can we sign up people to work on a CodeQL query. So I didn't know if opening a new tag in the Bugzilla, or if opening a new repo and using issues on it and just kind of playing with that as an issue tracker that lets us track this kind of committee work. I don't know if Mickey would want to track anything on the community meetings. I don't know if any of the other teams or the stewards would want to track general things, not necessarily code things, but general kind of work streams to try to, you know, get a more reliable process here where we actually get things closed out.
Well, I'm in favor of anything that would actually get people helping, Sean.
So, okay, maybe I'll send you an email offline. Maybe we can find a good home for that. Like I said, selfishly, I'd love to be able to track things for myself and make sure that these meetings are actually delivering and getting things done. But I'm sure others feel the same way.
I don't think it would hurt at all to send the minutes from this meeting to the mailing list. I know that you're doing a good job of putting stuff into the discussions. I don't know that everybody looks at that. I think the only place that everybody looks is the mailing list. So even if it was, you know, a short summary and a link to the point in the discussion for the last meeting, just so that everybody knows what's going on. And if you have, you know, just even in that summary email, here's the 10 or 15 top topics for this meeting and the ones that are, you know, active or unassigned, just as a quick summary. And that as far as official tracking of that, so that it's, you know, like a report versus you typing it in, you know, that's I think you've got some great flexibility on how you manage that.
Oh, go ahead, Eric.
We try and use GitHub boards. Would be make it a little more visible for people. There's more GitHub integration, right?
Yeah, that's where my head was at too, and I like having like a website I go to that kind of shows things. Just to comment back, Mike, at the request of Mickey, which to be fair, she's not here, but I haven't seen her upload any more community meetings. I have been uploading these videos to YouTube, and I have been documenting each of the topics and their starting moments, so you can click the link and jump to each topic. But that's really kind of all I've been doing now. I haven't even been updating the discussion other than to tell them when meetings are canceled or point back to the YouTube channel. I think our data shows that we get only a couple of views, if even that, on YouTube. So I don't think that should be surprising, but that's kind of what we've been doing so far.
And like, just FYI, when I go to like the EDK2, I guess that's the, it's in the EDK discussions area, right? And that's, if I look at the top level discussions, there's like, you know, from the EDK2 repo and go to the discussions tab.
Yep.
It's like, where is the, I just see this thing from March 7th. If I'm just looking at this for the first time, it looks like there's nothing active since March 7th or April 2nd. Right. And I know that's not true.
Yeah, if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see our last comment. It's a kind of a running thread. But yeah, I agree. It's not a great way to do a long running thread, which is why I stopped doing it. And it definitely, no one else has jumped in there. There was a couple comments way back at the beginning, but so what about, if other people have some good ideas, let me know.
What does GitHub projects do? Because I haven't tried that before.
Michael, you want to speak on that?
Yeah, it's a good way to organize your issues and things. And so it kind of brings like a work board that you can use to organize, like, you know, the states of different issues. So you can put things in a backlog. You can say things are being targeted for a certain stable tag. So you can take like all your GitHub issues that are targeted for that stable tag. You can make that stable tag be a milestone, and then you can associate all of the issues with that milestone in your project. And so it's kind of just a really good way to organize your issues with your releases and things like that. and it has a pretty good UI for being able to do that.
Okay, and I see that that tab is available not only at the repo level, but it's also available at the org level for Tiano Core. So if you do it at the org level, because I think a lot of the things we talk about are not single repo scoped, right? They cross repo boundaries. So I'm wondering if we want to consider, trying something out with projects at the Tiano Core scope.
I think that makes good sense. I was under the impression, and I think it is true, that you need to have GitHub issues. So I think projects are just a way to kind of organize issues. And my guess is the projects at the org level can span different repos, which is kind of great because there's oftentimes a tools issue that can span multiple repos. But I think we do have to have issues somewhere. And that's where I was thinking a lot of times you'll see an organization have a repo named the same thing as their organization. Sometimes they have stuff in there around, working with the project and kind of replace our wiki with that. Sometimes they don't. But I was thinking of creating that to then create issues, and then the issues in there could be related to, things that span beyond a single code fix or code problem.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like you can link to PRs as well. I know that's not ideal for our current, an issue makes more sense before you have some code artifact. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. They are definitely focused on organizing things by issues and PRs.
Yeah, here's an example I'm showing of where I was using this a bit. So this is a list of all of the different PRs and the statuses, right? So it gives you a quick rundown of all these different things, who's working on them, and where they're at. So some of these are done, some are in the backlog, etc. And so if I go over here, I can check and see the states of these different issues. So I find it pretty useful that if you're in a call with the people working on things, you can manage what people are working on by bringing this up and talking about it, right? So like in this meeting, we're talking about we want to track individual things. We could file an issue for me going and updating the wiki page, right? And then we could assign that to me. Oops, I clicked something. We could assign that to me, and then we could put it in the backlog. And then, I could move it out of the backlog whenever I'm working on it, and I could move it to in progress or whatever. And then whenever we're done, we move it to done and so on, right? It provides kind of like this nice way to be able to see who's working on what. And if you use tags, like we're using tags here, you can get an idea of what they're working on pretty easily. Like you can see this is a medium to small change that's easy and non-functional, and this is a design change and that kind of a thing.
Okay. So I think what you were suggesting maybe, Sean, is if we created a separate repo that we turn issues on for basically managing the set of work items in Tiano Core, so you can enter an issue for like a feature work item, these collaboration things, and we could put it in there. We could even have a link to a Bugzilla if there happens to be, Bugzillas associated with it as well. We could put that inside of the issue itself, but then that would then bring in this project management feature to layer on top of it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm definitely open to that. That seems reasonable. It's where we want to go long term, and it sounds like, as we get issues used more and more, it'll be more natural, but maybe a temporary repo to hold these things is a good way to maybe start the management of it and to track it and to have owners and status in an easy to view location. And I think the CodeQL stuff fits in this as well, right, Michael?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. I'll send you an email and we can get a repo made and do that, and then I'll add that to the notes here for everyone, and hopefully that becomes a place that if people have opens, you can bring something up there so we don't forget about it. And if you're contributing to solving some of these problems, you can update things there to help communicate that.
Okay. And I know, like, just other categories of things that could probably fold into that is, I know each year when we try to work on Google Summer of Code, we have what are kind of our bigger ideas that fit into that scope. So this may be a way to also have a way to organize all of those outstanding things that which nobody's working on but are potentially interesting for the future.
Yep. Yeah.
So we can kill the wiki page and put it there instead.
Yeah, I think the data flows of that, like how you update that and how you manage it, is better than a wiki page for sure. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And I think that's a way to describe it to the community, that this is for those bigger cross repo kind of, how do we get organized around things like that? And that's why we need a separate way to enter issues. And if there's a Bugzillas or Bugzillas associated with them, we can provide links to them.
Okay, great. All right, anybody else with any opens? All right, if nothing more, we'll talk next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Mike.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.